Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today is part 2 of my sizing guide video, and in the last video I talked about the different sizes that you can make using a certain template, any of the ones that I have or even someone else's, and the different sizes that I think mark a certain range, so small, medium, large, or extra large. And so that video I think helped with just a general idea of what you can make or what petals to use for a certain size flower. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about when you're making a specific size flower, you can actually make them in a number of different ways to get different looks out of them. And so for this video, I'm using my template 19, which is this shape here. So you'll see I have 2 sets, and my aim is actually to have the same size flower, but it will look completely different from one another because of the petals and the bases that I use. So I'll start with this first set here. What I have here is a 4-inch wide hexagon, so I can measure that here. So 4 inches across, and then this one is a 7-inch wide petal, but in order to get a certain diameter flower, I want to know the height measurement. So in measuring this, it is about 7.5 inches tall. So when I'm using this, I'll put this 4-inch hexagon in the middle. I will be cutting the flower, the petals, like this in order to prep the flower petal. And I will be gluing in that, and it does lose some sort of height. It does lose some height, and so in the end, the diameter is smaller, but I'm taking that into account. So with a 4-inch hexagon and also gluing it further into the center rather than at the edge, I do lose some height. And so overall, the flower might be maybe a total of 4 or 3 inches plus maybe 7 or 6.5. So in total, I'm roughly estimating here this flower might be maybe 15 inches wide after I finish gluing and prepping all the petals. So I'll go ahead and sort of prep all the petals and sort of finish with the flower. I'll just speed this part up. Okay, perfect. So now I have all my petals glued around this hexagon, and I'll go ahead and measure. It is about, it's about 14 inches wide. I think I glued it a little bit closer to the center of the hexagon than I had wanted to. So here I have a 14-inch wide flower. What I'll try to do with this set is also mimic 14 inches wide. So for this set of flowers, I have a 7-inch wide hexagon. I'm going to move my glue gun a little bit higher so I don't burn myself. So 7-inch wide hexagon, and these petals here, they are 5.5 inches wide, but again I want to know the height. So it is about 6 inches tall. So with a 7-inch hexagon and a 6-inch tall petal, 7 plus 6 plus 6 is 19, but again, I will also be prepping these petals and gluing them onto here, so it should lose overall about 4 inches. So I'll go ahead and prep these petals and glue them all together like I did the first flower. Okay, so now that I got the petals glued onto the hexagon, I'm going to measure the size of the flower. So it is about 14 inches too. But that can change depending on how far away from the center of the hexagon that you glue the petals, how high you cut, how long you cut that slit in the petals. There's a number of factors that can change, but if you're gluing and you're worried about keeping the sizes the same, you can always measure before you glue. So there's a clear difference between this flower here and this flower here. They look obviously different, but they're the same size, right? So one big thing to note about this flower here is that you can see there's a lot of gaps between the petals. Here you would definitely need to add more layers to cover that up, and what you'll end up is a larger area for centers. So you can add a larger center here. With this one, you don't even need another petal layer if you don't want to. You can glue on a center, you can glue on a foam ball that's decorated, and all you would need is one layer of petals. So that counts a lot if you're trying to save paper, you're just trying to make a lot of flowers to cover a large surface area, and you don't want to use too much paper. It would be a better idea to use larger petal sizes and a smaller hexagon base. That way you can save money on paper by using less and just still having the same effect. The flowers look a little different, but it will still cover the same amount of surface area if that's what your goal is. With this one, you definitely need more paper. You can't leave the flower looking like this. It looks like a hot mess. But you can add more petal layers, and then if you want to embellish the flower with a larger center that's more elaborate, it would fit right here perfectly versus this one. So I'm going to add a second layer of petals to this flower. So this one is just 5 inches wide. So 5 inches wide, so it's just one step smaller. If you're following my templates, it's just a petal that's smaller than that. And I'm going to go ahead and prep these petals and glue them on to show you what it looks like in the end. Okay, perfect. So now that I have glued the second layer of petals, you can see the difference that it makes when you add even just a second layer. And as you add more and more layers closer together towards the center, the gaps do close up as you get further and further in there, but you can still add a nice little center. You know, if you add another layer of petals, which I normally add 3 layers, it will look perfect with a center made there. So what you can notice is that there are some gaps here in this outer layer. You can add another layer of the 5.5 inch wide petals, in this case, along the circumference, so that way it fills in the gaps and it looks like a fuller flower. And then the end goal of this flower, in my opinion, is that it looks like a really pretty flower with a lot of layers, and you can still get the same width because of this larger hexagon. And you can be a little more fancy by adding in a nice center in the middle. So I'm going to move back to that first flower that we made. So here, I think that you can get away with just adding a center in the middle and just leaving the flower as is. What you can do always is just add one more layer of petals. And so I have one here. This is a 6.5 inch wide petal. So I'll go ahead and prep these and add them to the flower, and I'll show you the end result. So now that I'm done, you can see that there's not a whole lot of room for a center in the middle. You could add in a large center that covers up this entire area. If you wanted, it would still look great, but this smaller area compared to this flower, you can see there's a difference. And let me grab a center that I have made already. So here's the center that I had made for template 8. Some of you might notice this if you've watched that video. I just grabbed it from the flower. So you can see that if I wanted to, I could fill this in, and there's still a lot of room to cover it up. With a large enough center, the flower will look essentially the same. See, because it fills the entire center of this flower. It'll look exactly the same as maybe this flower here, but the petals are smaller in this one compared to this one. Right? But if you're looking to make a smaller little center, this flower would look better than if you had made it with this center here. Right? Essentially, you could have used the largest center, which is what I provide, an 8 inch wide hexagon, and glued it on both, and it still would have worked. But with this flower, you would have noticed that you would have to glue the petals a little bit closer towards the center, probably just leaving just a tiny little space in the middle, compared to using the small 4 inch wide one. But I just wanted to make this video to show you the difference you can get when you have the same size flower, right? The same size flower, but using different petals. If I were to give you one guide in terms of how you want to make it, just play around. If you like the larger petals but you want them closer together, you can just use the largest petals that you want with smaller hexagons and you can get this style. Or you can just use any hexagon that you want. Smaller petals, which tend to need more layers in the flower, you can just make yours that way. There's no one rule for how to make your flowers. It just depends on how you like them. A lot of times it depends on what centers you use to make the flower look finished, and so there's no hard and fast rule. Essentially, I think it's make it however you want it. So while this flower may look really simple, it's easy to cut, if you want something more visually pleasing, I would say add more flowers that have texture to it to make it more balanced. So I'll be making that video in the future, different things that you can do to add texture. Please let me know if you have any requests for other types of videos. I would love to make them. I have a whole list of ideas ready to go, and it's just a matter of executing them. Thank you so much for watching this video. Bye.